to session 2 of our three-part book study series featuring Mitch Weathers and his book Executive Function for Every Classroom. This learning experience is brought to you by the Supporting Innovative Practices Project, funded by the California Department of Education Special Education Division. Thank you again to CDE and our respective county offices of education in El Dorado County and Riverside County for supporting this work and helping create opportunities for educators to learn together across the regions. In our first session, we explored the foundations of executive functioning and why these skills are essential for student success. Today, as we dig into chapters 4 through 6, which we know for sure you all read, we'll focus on the classroom systems, routines, and instructional practices that make executive functioning visible and teachable in everyday learning environments. Together, we'll examine how predictable structures, clear routines, and intentional teacher modeling can reduce cognitive load, strengthen student independence, and create more accessible learning experiences for all students, particularly our neurodivergent learners. Throughout today's session, we encourage you to reflect on your classroom and school systems. Where are students thriving within your organization, planning, and follow through? Where are there barriers that are still showing up? And how might small shifts in routines, modeling, or feedback help students navigate learning more independently and confidently? As always, this session is being recorded and will be archived on our website at sipimpact.org. We'll continue using our shared Padlet as a collaborative space for resources, reflections, and tools you can bring back into your own setting. ASL interpretation and closed captioning remain available throughout the session, and we invite you to actively participate in the chat as we learn alongside one another. Thank you again for being here and for the work that you do every day to create supportive, inclusive environments for students. Pass it over to you, Mitch.
Thanks, Janelle. Appreciate the intro. Hello, everybody. Sarah, are you joining in here too? You want to say anything before I start?
No way, let's just get going.
Let's get going. All right, everybody. Thanks for being here for part two of this three-part book study. And like last time, we're going to spend a little time. I got just a little bit of time to screen share, which I love to do. And I thought it would be most fun. I'll do a quick recap, executive functions, but then I'd like to just kind of walk through the routine that's outlined in chapters 4, 5, and 6, which is the focus of today's session. So let's start with my screen share here, and then we'll get going. Thumbs up, Sarah. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Going. All right, here we are. Second part, there's the book. We are doing book study. We're looking at chapters 4 through 6. And as a quick recap, what are these executive functions? I went over this last time we were all together, but again, I hope maybe if some of you are here for part two, maybe you missed part one, caught the recording. So we'll just go over this real quick as a starting place, that these executive functions are these cognitive processes that control goal-oriented behavior. And so it's good to keep in mind when we talk about executive functions, there are these mental processes we know in the brain where they're happening. But you'll also hear kind of synonymous with executive functions as executive functioning skills. Those skills are those behaviors, the goal-oriented behaviors that are kind of in some ways brought to you by the cognitive processes, and you hear them kind of used synonymously, interchanged. But for the practitioners in the book study, us in the classroom working with kids, not just teachers, right? It's what does that look like practically for the practitioner? These cognitive processes in the classroom are their behaviors that allow students to pay attention, manage their time, get organized, complete tasks, etc. So keep that in mind, that those behaviors or skills you're seeing are brought to you by these cognitive processes. I like to distill it down to one word in particular for what is we're looking at in this particular book are higher order executive functions, which really start to emerge and come online for students developmentally, just the biology of it in grades 3, 4, 5, and continue on into our mid to late 20s. But I like to use this word studentness. I borrowed it from a school that reached out to myself and my team at Organized Binder a few years ago, and they said we're on this mission to develop this sense of studentness in our students. And when I heard that and interacted with them, I thought, well, that's a great way to really sum up what we hope to see, right, emerging from these executive functions in students in their learning, this sense of studentness, like I know how to do school. There's a sense of agency about that and dexterity in my learning. And what the research has shown is when we look at those behaviors and skills, there's a specific set of executive functioning skills that really set students up for success. And as you're making your way through the book, if you haven't finished it yet, you'll recognize images kind of like this, a little bit different, but that each chapter and sometimes more than one chapter, we're focusing on a specific executive functioning skill, but keep in mind that, of course, they're all interrelated. We're going to get to 3 of these today. And I started with this last time, horrible presentation technique here. But I just want to give you all kudos for your interest in executive functions and taking the time to learn about, taking the time to be here. Because although we're going to look at school readiness and school success, look at the left column. Like it has a significant impact on people, humans, but young people's lives, lifelong, when they have access to and exposure and practice with these executive functions. So the word I asked you to write down last time, if you were here, was environment. I think Paul Tuff says it best that we can improve a child's environment in specific ways that lead to better executive functioning. We can increase their prospects for success in a particularly efficient way. And that's good news for us practitioners, because what we're not here to talk about this afternoon or this evening, wherever you are, that is a curriculum or teaching executive functions. It's really about intentionally crafting the environment in ways that lead to better executive functions over time. And so what I like to say is executive functions aren't taught. They're best learned when students clearly see them modeled while practicing them as a byproduct of engaging in a predictable routine. I refer to these in the book as the 3 keys: clarity, modeling, and routine. And like I said at the beginning, I want to take a moment, as fast as I can go, to actually show you this routine. It's an Organized Binder lens. I'm not here to introduce you to Organized Binder. I know you saw some of what we call system files in these chapters, but I kind of just wanted to walk through it for the sake of clarity, modeling. I wanted to show you this routine. And so those steps of the routine on a daily basis would look something like this. And I'm going to keep coming back to this teach your class, that we're really talking about a small time footprint with this daily routine. The first few moments and the last few moments. And as a byproduct, again, as a byproduct of participating in that routine, students are getting practice with and doing these executive functioning skills over time. Because one thing you'll learn about the development of executive functioning skills is that repetition is key. We have to have practice over and over and over again. So if we look at working memory as one of these executive functions, this is an Organized Binder template. We call them system files. You've seen some of these. And I'm just going to pretend really quick that you're in my first period classroom. I taught 9th grade most of my career, but you can pick any grade level. This could even be in a self-contained class where I'm using it for a particular subject or an activity. But let's just pretend you're in my 9th grade science class and it's first period. This is the 5th week of the school year, or the 5th week I've implemented this routine. And I would have this ideally projected for you however I could. It could be an overhead projector. It could be a smart board, or whatever fancy technology you might have. But ideally, I'd have this up. This looks exactly like what students have in front of them in their binder or their portfolio. And so what I'm doing is just increasing, or I should say it this way, decreasing the need for me to explain it, right? So it's all nonverbal visual cueing. So when I come in, I just have that visual reminder of, oh yeah, in order to be on time or be ready to learn, I just need to be in my assigned seat or lab table or whatever the learning environment is like. with my binder open to this page. If it really was an organized binder, the in front of it, the pages in front of it are gold, the ones behind it are green. And so although I see this modeled for me every day, as we're starting to get ready to engage in the lesson or the class period, and let's pretend there's 30 students in the room, I could have as many as 29 other visual reminders around me to help me remember what it is that the task that I'm engaged in right now, which is really just getting ready to learn. Okay. And you'll notice there's no prompt, there's nothing here for students to do other than engage in the work of getting ready to learn. Um, when we do begin, we'll just pretend that that's a bell ringing because it's pretty typical. Is then I'm going to show you what we call this kickoff, and I'm going to engage you in the work of learning. They're two different things, but too often we jump right to the work of learning, and we're not really clearly modeling what it looks like to be ready to learn, to be ready to engage. And so if I just take a moment and have those nonverbal visual cueing, that modeling, there's absolute clarity about where I need to be. And then I engage us in the beginning routine. I take a moment and I'm encouraging you, if you, and you, I know you've read this, if you've read the book, to look back. Take a moment to reteach. Of course, as a practitioner, as a teacher, you're trying to answer questions, clear up misconceptions. But what we're doing if we look back is we take a moment, and students have to pause in order to go back and retrieve that information that they've learned or interacted with. And that retrieval practice, as it's called, is really key for learning and over time moving what we're trying to learn into our long-term memory. But think about this: if it was my science class, and each day I'm just starting by looking back, and it really is the 5th week of the school year, let's pretend, and I'm just making a point to tie this simple prompt to the standard or the objective of the previous day's lesson or previous lessons. My students, by the end of the 5th week, could have as many as 25 standards aligned prompts tied to the objective of every lesson that we've engaged in that they can use as a tool, as a resource to look back and learn to study from. Okay. Carry that out. If you're just consistent with this through the end of the semester, into the school year, you start to create this really robust resource for students as they're prepping. And the science of learning, or the cognitive science here, is that we're holding information in mind and mentally working with it. And I love this, or said differently, working with information that's no longer perceptually present. I have to think back. That's the working memory. Having to kind of use it, hold it in cognitive space long enough to do something with it, whatever it is you want them to do. Could be responding to the prompt. It could be first doing a pair share. You can do whatever you want. It's that process that's so critical for learning. And in this time, it's a direct instruction, usually a reteach. Students are not, and if there's accommodations that need to be made, there certainly can be, but ideally students, when possible, are writing this down in their portfolio. And it's not a quiz. It's just a kickoff. It's being ready to learn, giving me a chance to reteach these things. And then we would move on to the next step of the routine. And with Organized Binder in particular, the routine, we begin and end on that weekly lifeline, that white B page you're seeing. So I just want to jump to the end of class, my 9th grade class. And we're taking a few moments at the end, and we're doing the same thing. But it's a more immediate retrieval, because in the same way that kickoff or our beginning routine is giving a chance to think back, interact with things we've previously learned, at the end, it's your learning target for the day. It's what I hoped you learned or can demonstrate or make connections to at the end of the lesson. But I'm back to that kind of, okay, I'm digesting, I'm reviewing it. What did I learn today? What was confusing for me? And it's different than an exit ticket. If you've read the chapter on concluding routine, I unabashedly take aim at the exit ticket because I don't believe it's a sustainable practice, certainly for secondary teachers. But I can get that same super critical formative feedback, this one-on-one private conversation between me and every kid in my class or on my caseload, every student. And I can read them every day if you have that bandwidth, but I can also do it at the end of the week. And it's plenty of time for that formative assessment or intervention. It's the only place in all of this whole book that I dare you to try this, because you got to collect them and you got to read them, which is time outside of class, whether after school or over a weekend. And I dare you to try it, because if you do and you're consistent with it, you will start to see you show up on Monday and it's like having a pulse on every student in the class in a way that homework and classwork just can't tell you, because it's their own words. It's this one-on-one conversation you're having with students. And it's retrieval. So based on a century of research, in order to transform learning, we must focus on getting information out, a strategy called retrieval practice, right? And I'm empathetic here, okay, to all of us. We spend a lot of time and energy trying to get information in. That's kind of like what we're hired to do as teachers. But if you don't have this messy process of getting it out, and I've never said, and I love this quote, because what it doesn't say is we must focus on getting the correct information out or the right information out, right? This is about just retrieval, holding it, working with it, that messy process. And ultimately, Marzano and a bunch of other researchers have shown us it's increasing exposures. So what Marzano says here is teachers should find ways to expose students to details multiple times, at least three. Ideally, no more than 2 days apart. Well, let's think about this for a moment. If Monday I teach some new concept or standard in my lesson, maybe that's your first exposure. And at the end of that class or lesson, I'm having you kind of interact with it and digest it, summarize it. That's the second interaction or exposure. And if I give any practice or homework or next steps outside of school, that could be the third exposure. And when you come back to me 24 hours later, not because I'm doing anything different, it's just a byproduct of routine, we're right back to that concept or standard that we interacted with the previous day. So just by routine, I could have as many as 4 exposures or interactions with the stuff I'm trying to learn, ultimately helping move it into long-term memory. Two
Mitch,
more
we had a
steps. Oh, you got a question? Okay, I
comment.
was going to say
Well,
two
it was
more, but
we've got a comment specifically about that part. Some Melinda said that she gets so much cheating on this part because they look at what the next person did and they don't give her what they know. What advice do you have for that?
the next person, I need to kind of get a little more
Look
detail, like the
looking at the
person
table
next to you.
next to them, yeah. So
Yeah.
they don't know what they're writing or what they
They're
were
just
working
copying
on. They
their
just copied.
neighbors. Yeah. So here's the thing. Is it Melinda?
Melinda, yeah.
Melinda, that's a really good question, and I'm empathetic. I get it. One thing, I'm moving way too fast here to. There's a lot of things I wish I would be saying, but one of it is this: there's no point value associated with this. In other words, it's totally okay to get it wrong. And I'm not saying this is a panacea and it's going to fix it, but what I found when I have that same exact thing happening in my class, it's like I just want to get it done. It's like check it off my list of to-dos, right? I would actually tell students what's going on. I would introduce them to the retrieval practice. Like, here's what's actually happening in your brain. Now, can you look at your neighbor and just copy it? Yes. Can I stop you? Probably not. Are you ultimately kind of doing yourself a disservice? Absolutely. So, what I would rather do is give it your best shot and then tell them, I'm going to go over the answer anyway. That's the whole point of this. If there's a correct answer, it doesn't always have to be academic, right? It doesn't even have to be a correct answer. I was in an art class, I think last school year at a school using organized binder, and her kickoff was when we learned about this, it was some shade of purple. I forget the actual name. The question was, how did it make you feel when you learned about this particular pigment or color? And I was like, that's a fascinating kickoff, right? You can't really cheat on that one because, well, I guess you could, but why? Right. So um, that's how I approached it, and I've helped other teachers approach it, just letting them know that, like, hey, this isn't one about right or wrong, whether you know it or not. I promise you, I'm going to go over it if there is a right answer. But there's actual research, and I cite it in the book, and the term's called generation, where you present students with a problem or a prompt, and you let them quote unquote productively struggle with it. They try to answer it. Doesn't matter if they get it right or wrong, but they try to get it down. And then you come in with the review or clearing up, talking about discussing that prompt, right? Going over the responses or the answers. And what I've seen, so what happens there is if a student does have a misconception, what's going on there is they're actually articulating it. They're writing it down where you can see it, and then you go over it. And what the research has shown, when that happens first, I'm more likely to clear up the misconception, right? So it's still a review, excuse me, but what I've seen in many classrooms is the review will look something like this, where we start and the teacher, well intentioned, is saying, "Hey, everybody, welcome. Remember what we did yesterday?" And they kind of explain the topic or the standard or what we did. And then we're going to move on to this today. The teacher's the only one active in that scenario. Again, well intentioned. Like, do you remember this? But if I can flip that and let you be active with that stuff, whether you get it right or wrong, and remind them over and over, hey, we're gonna go over this. You could cross it out, you could write it in the margin, you can erase it, whatever it needs to be. So don't worry about being right or wrong. But if you try this, I can promise you, and this is true, this is research backed, you're going to remember this better when it comes time for our test if you engage in this with me. So just try it. So, Melinda, I want you to try some of that, and then you have my email. Look on page 168 and let me know how it goes. And I've got more stuff up
Thank
my
you.
sleeve. Yeah. So, after that first step, we're going to go back to the beginning of the class or the lesson. I have two more things, Sarah, and then I'll
Yeah.
stop sharing. Second step of the routine, next chapter in the book, from the beginning routine, is taking a moment to introduce the lesson. Right. There's a few reasons why this is the second step of the routine. The first being that kickoff, or that whatever you want to call it. I'm just, again, organized binder speak. You don't have to use these phrases. That's active teaching. I'm walking around. I can show you videos. It's really, really impactful for students that beginning that way. But every teacher, if you're a teacher on the call, you know as well as I do, we all have a little bit of business we have to take care of at the beginning of class, right? It might be putting attendance in within the first 5 minutes. It's handing papers back. It's collecting things. It's checking in with a kid. That's just part of what we do. So if I'm active right at the beginning, which I want to be for a bunch of reasons that I outline in the book, I also want to build in time to do some of that. I don't want to try to multitask. I don't want to do is put that kickoff prompt up and then go over to my desk and put in my attendance, right? Because I'm active teaching. But what I could be doing is talking about what we're going to do today in this lesson as efficiently as I can while I'm handing back papers, putting in my attendance. I could multitask doing that. And so it kind of is a win-win just in terms of the business stuff I have to do. You'll notice the subtitle, you see it, of I'm a huge believer in the power of predictable routines in a classroom. So the idea of me just introducing what's coming at you in the next whatever, let's say you have a 50-minute class if you're a secondary teacher, or it's a 50-minute block and a self-contained class, there's some predictability in that. And those little pieces of like bits of clarity and predictability have a huge impact on students, in particular those whose lives outside of school or outside of class are anything but predictable. It might even skew towards traumatic or chaotic. So the more I can just remember that, like the power of predictable feels very safe, right? So I'm getting to kind of introduce the lesson. There's some predictability there. I'm able to multitask a little bit, get my business done. But the real reason for that, and that's all really important, and I do believe that. But the executive functioning that we're talking about here is time and task management, which plays a huge role in planning, which is actually a higher order executive function. And so, although this is deliberately not called a calendar or a planner, because it's not, it's just a log of what we're doing in this class. That's why it's an agenda. It kind of looks like a planner. It kind of looks like a calendar, right? There's 2 weeks on the front, there's 2 weeks on the back. And there's enough in an organized binder for the whole semester and then a refill for the end of the year. And I'm certainly not going to model what I'm about to, like, hey, you just need to be ready to go on week 15, right? I could do that, but they're just starting to learn these skills and habits. And so what I might do is say, here's what we're doing today. And oh, by the way, we're going to do this heart lab. I'm going to pretend this is a cardiovascular unit, heart lab. And next week, we're still at the beginning of the semester or school year here in September. I'm going to introduce lab reports to you and how you write a lab report. That's the writing, that's the composition we do in this class. But what I know is that your first lab report is due at the end of next week on the 25th. So I'll tell you what, let's write that on our agenda because that's what people do who keep a calendar. And I won't give you any homework the night before, and so you can finalize it and put all your touches on. So let's write that on our agenda, guys, because that's what people do who keep a calendar. And then when you show up Tuesday, kick the lesson off, agenda Wednesday, as I'm just simply, and these are just moments. It's not taking a lot of time, making my way through this 2 week progression or this unit of study. At a minimum, nobody's going to be shocked that this lab report's coming up. But on a higher end, I'm starting to teach and model how you keep a calendar, planning ahead, time blocking. And I'm, as a high school teacher, always saying, hey, you might end up in college and someone might hand you a syllabus and you're just supposed to be ready to go on week 15. And no one's going to talk to you about it anymore because you're in college or trade school or whatever. All you have to do is what we just did. Just find all those due dates, put it on your planner, everything you need to do, and then you have one job. Just look at your planner every day and you won't miss stuff, right? Third step of the routine. So most of the time, everybody, it's this: kick off, introduce my lesson, get organized, jump into what you do. On occasion, we'll hit this toolkit. So this skill, of course, is organization. Here's our hypothetical day of the 14th. Anything that I'm creating as a student, anything I'm handing out to them, anything out of the consumable, anything we're doing, as follow that date column with me. Anything we're creating in this thematic unit of study, and every teacher at every grade level I've ever met and worked with, we all teach through some type of thematic unit of curriculum. It could be chapters in a math book, for me, scientific phenomenon or human systems, right? So we have these themes. Point I'm trying to make here, and you'll notice there's no tabs for notes and homework and assessments, because what that does is it takes this unit sequencing I've just modeled for you and it rips it all apart and puts it in different places in the portfolio. And what we want to understand, right, is that lesson planning, our individual lessons, are of paramount importance, but so are our unit plans, our unit sequencing. And we want to capture that, one, for the sake of clarity for students. There is no ambiguity about what we've done in this unit over the last week or two, right? But what we know from cognitive science is that new knowledge is built on prior knowledge, and the chunking, the granularity of those items as we're building matter if we're going to retain it. And I want to capture all of that. I want to capture this coherent sequence for students. So in other words, it doesn't matter if it's notes or homework or a worksheet or a lab report or an essay or an assessment. It's all part of the lens. Here is the unit of study. Okay, so teachers on the call, this is a framework to structure what you're already doing. This is the stuff you're already doing. Students are keeping track of their score, and all they do is they write that number in the upper right-hand corner. Doesn't matter what it is. So behind this table of contents, let's really pretend here we are at number 10. I could look right behind G1, which is our first unit of study, and I would see number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. And if you do that, and by the way, the question I know is circulating out there, what about my digital stuff? I have some that's analog, some that's digital. It's easy. Use a little insignia like that to say, oh, that lives in my Google Classroom. And then I go to Google Classroom. There's a folder there by the same name, same nomenclature, cardiovascular respiratory system, G1. I open it up. Number 5, coloring blood vessels, date. So it matches, because we know, Google Drive can be the digital version of the book bag, right? I prefer the book bag because we can all see it and intervene as a starting place before we move to the digital. Anyhow, let's pretend that I've given all these back. I've graded them if it needed to be graded or whatever. They actually have all 10, or they should. You could see them right behind G1. And if they're missing one, now students are acutely aware. Like, I don't have number 6. Well, maybe I didn't hand it back yet if I collected it. Maybe you lost it. Maybe you didn't do it. Maybe it's in the backpack. But they just know because it's right behind that table of contents. And then we get to the end of the unit, one of my favorite parts, and we call these unit chunks. We just staple that table of contents together. All of the student work goes in the very back of the binder. We get a new table of contents and start it over. And if you're consistent with this third step of the routine, right, just as quick as you can go, here's 2 students studying for a cumulative final in June. with everything they've created or been given neatly organized in these thematic unit chunks or these unit packets. They also have that beginning routine and concluding routine that are tied to the standard or the objective of every lesson for the school year. So it starts to become this year-long robust portfolio or evidence binder of their effort and their learning. And it all ends up back in the binder and they get to take it with them. And what's it mean if these were, let's say, ninth grade or seventh grade English student? What if they went to their next year in ELA with their previous year's binder? What would that do for subject area collaboration? And there's a lot to talk about there. But most importantly here, everybody, we don't know their grades. This is all a byproduct of clarity, modeling, and routine for the sake of developing executive functions. And everybody's participating. It's an expectation. In other words, you can get practice doing school, engaging, looking like a scholar, and still simultaneously be maybe struggling with the content. School's meant to be effortful. It's meant to be hard at times, and that's okay. That struggle, that productive struggle, but too often in the modern classroom, success and engagement are tied to content and content understanding. And if I'm struggling with the content, I may feel less inclined to engage. One more thing, Sarah, and then I'll hand it off to you. So,
Good,
oh,
because we have a
oh,
ton of questions. No, you keep
we're
going.
done.
We had a ton
I
of
know
questions left.
it just stopped on me, so I think we're okay. All I was going to say, people, you'll see it in the chapters. The academic toolkit. Sometimes you don't want things trapped in those unit chunks behind the table of contents because you need to reference them or add to them throughout the school year. Just put them in the toolkit so that they're not trapped. They're there and they're available throughout the school year. But in most days, it's kickoff, agenda, table of contents, do your thing, reflect at the end so you have that formative feedback, the place I dare you to try it. And what teachers report back when they get this routine or a similar routine in place, they find that they have more time for teaching and learning. Okay, that's what I have for you, Sarah.
This hits home today because I was the backpack kid. You would have
I would have
had
loved
many
having you in my
moments.
class.
Me and my backpack.
Well, we'll talk about this on the third part, everybody, is that's okay. That's what the
Hmm.
binder check's all about. So we have
Yeah,
some stop points where we're like, okay, we're going to put everything back together. And the more repetition with that, pretty soon you're like, oh, one of my sayings is everything has a place where it lives. It's more likely to find its way home, right? If I know
yeah,
exactly where it lives. But if I don't necessarily, that's that ambiguity. If I don't know where it lives or it doesn't have a place to live, well, I know a place to put it. I want to get out of class anyway and go to recess or go to.
yeah.
So
Oh, I didn't catch the name, but somebody had a question that said, have any teachers tried doing this with planners in elementary school? I tried this year, but I still have many students who don't fill it in with me. I love that she brought up planners because that's a big part of chapter 4.
yeah. So the agenda is the planner in some ways. It's specific for just one class. Um, it is whoever this is. I'm also empathetic with you and anybody who's ever taught at a school that bought planners is probably also empathetic because we spend sometimes not a small amount of money on planners and we hand them out well intentioned and we hope that students will use them. And if it's not part, this has been my experience that if it's not part of a collective routine, right? So this is what we're doing in this class. So with what I just went over, the second step of the routine is we're updating our planner. If let's just say, if that's part of routine and we do it every day, there's you just I mean I'm again moving really quick here, but there's probably no question about what it would look like to be on time in a class with what I just went over, right? I have my binder open to that white page. It's projected for me in front, visual, right? So that kind of clarity and only that kind of clarity allows me to bring around accountability. Another way to say it is that we have no business talking about accountability unless we have that kind of clarity. And so if there's ambiguity, like I don't know what to do with this, and I'm not saying this is you, the teacher, I think your question, I'm going to get to it in one moment, but when we just hand out these planners to kids and we expect them to one, know how to do them, more importantly, see the value in doing it. And we're kind of like, there's too much ambiguity there. So if we try to hold them accountable, it's like, well, when am I supposed to do, how do I do this? So if I make it part of the routine, and if you don't have binders and some of the stuff we're talking about, and you're really just talking about time management, which is what a planner is about, my encouragement is incorporated into the daily routine. It's an expectation. It's absolutely clear. We do it every day. It takes just a few moments. And then I can hold you accountable. We're going to talk about this. This is the binder check when we get together next time, part 3. But more importantly, or maybe not more importantly, equally important is I can invite families to hold you accountable as well because, hey, we're all doing this together collectively. It's not hard. It's really important. Why aren't you updating your planner? So unless some of those pieces are in place, and even then, willful defiance is a real thing. That's okay. We just need to have a conversation and see get and I'm not saying it's all willful defiance. Some of it is that leading with curiosity, like, what's going on here? Like maybe there is something there and we need to adjust for that student, or maybe it's everything I'm talking about here is tier 1, all kids in the gen ed class, but maybe there is something we need to, that might be deemed a tier 2 or tier 3 uh, intervention or help with that student. So I hope that's helpful in terms of the plan, or that's a frustration for some folks.
And it was Brittany. Thank you, Brittany.
Thanks, Brittany.
Casey and I were pretty in tune here. Her and I had a very similar question. While reading this was Casey's. While reading this chapter, I was wondering how this part translates to the elementary world. I see it being something that is already filled in, but I would say we won't need them keeping track of their scores. So would you say this agenda isn't part of the elementary plan? But wait, I asked how I want to know the agenda, but also the beginning and concluding routine, because you're very specific in secondary with one class and then they move on. While in
Right.
elementary K6, 3-6, they're self-contained doing all the subjects. At what point in that beginning and concluding, what are you asking about? Do you just
Right.
pick? So that was
Yeah.
very layered. Take your time.
No, and it's a layered grade. They're layered grade bands. So the reason this book doesn't say just set for the secondary classroom, one is the biology, like developmentally, starting to really the higher order EFs as opposed to like my new latest book, the one that just came out is for K through 3, and that's called core EFs, just different executive functioning. But that 3, 4, 5, I would say, because some middle schools started 6th grade where they're moving. In fact, we actually work with schools, and that's starting to happen in 4th and 5th grade where they have multiple teachers. So just so you know, that 3 through 12, what I just went over, of course, translates entirely to a secondary
Yeah.
environment because I have you for 50 minutes or 45 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it is if it's a block. The two things to consider in the upper elementary classroom implementing this routine. First is what most do. I'll just kind of go with what I see most of the time is a teacher will choose a block or a subject. Because let's be honest, you're teaching, you're everybody. You're the math teacher, you're the English
Yeah.
teacher, you're the history teacher, and you don't teach them all at the same time, right? You have times of the day or the week where, okay, we're doing our social studies block or unit, or right, depending on how you structure your school year. So what I've seen happen really well, and the idea behind that is, well, if we had maybe we're going to use organized binder for math, or I should say this routine for math, this portfolio for math. And maybe I'm just doing one, and that's okay.
Right.
Some will do math, and they'll just pick the subject or subjects they want to do, and they mimic a class period. And oftentimes they're saying, "Hey, we're not doing this all the time, but this is where you're headed into middle school. You're going to do this." Like, I visited a school a couple years last year where they had 10 class periods, and it was a 6, 7, 8. So you went from self-contained to 10 a day. That's a quantum leap for most students with a transition that's already problematic for many of our learners, the middle school transition. So you're kind of mimicking it. And if you do that, Then the beginning and concluding routine are specific to that content. My agenda, what we did in math, you could do that. And if you wanted to pre-populate it, as I think they had said it might, those little adjustments you're making based on the grade level and the students. Then your table of contents is your math unit that you're studying, right? Toolkit, all that stuff's math. The other option with that is saying we're going to use this more globally. And so the beginning, including routine, or the beginning of the day and the end of the day, the school day. And so I have
Yeah,
two options. I could choose, I'm going to focus on math with this today because I'm thinking there's something here we got to talk about. Or it could be more like check in, like, not say it's just SEL, social emotional, like, but where are you? How you doing to like some of those checks in? How are we doing as we're leaving? What do you need to take care of uh, at home before you come back to school tomorrow? So it's less, doesn't necessarily have to be content driven. And then what I've seen, if teachers do that, they can have a table of contents for different subjects. So I have a table of contents for math, one for English. And because it's self contained, you're probably the volume of like assignments and things aren't isn't filling up too quickly. Like if you tried to do that, have 1 1 inch binder for seventh grade, it's going to fill up in like a month. Still possible, but when it's all you with me, those are kind of the two pathways or adjustments I've seen that have worked well.
I love that. Somebody made a comment that it meets the requirements for students with accommodations, such as checklists, visual schedules, and
For
my
sure.
favorite part, what is good for all might be necessary for some.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. Oh, and meeting college and career transition services for secondary students with disabilities. That was gorgeous. Megan sees a challenge she saw with her students and also with kids at home is that they are recording the class agenda and not what they need to finish at the end of class. Or if it's a long project, what they have to accomplish in chunks. Do you have any recommendations on how to help students who need tasks broken down into smaller chunks into these routines?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, Back up just a touch. If there is things they need to be doing outside of school, like at home, then consider binders not staying in the classroom. Um, and anytime, whatever it is, our content, our curriculum, our directions, our instruction, and yes, time and task management, the more granular we can get, the more we chunk it, the better. And so what I hear in that, I'll just start by speaking to the long-term project. I've worked with a number of project-based learning teachers or schools, PBL schools over the years, and that agenda is really kind of a lifesaver because at first we're going to talk, kind of together about the sequence of a longer term project. Okay, here's the due date, and let's say I'm just making this up, 3 weeks from now.
Yeah.
And then we have to have the conversations around, okay, what are the items or the benchmarks or the things we need to accomplish that maybe are that stand out a little more in the sequence, right? Um, put those in kind of like milestones, let's say, in the project, and then we can have the conversation both weekly and daily about, okay, what is it that, and especially if it's a group project, what is it that I need to do by tomorrow outside of school, or what do I need to bring? And so what I've seen in that, like, so now I kind of have the larger scope of the project, and it's circling back to that agenda at the end of class. So I just went over that option of the routine being my reflection. I've also seen teachers flip back to that. And maybe that second part of the agenda is, what do I need to do at home, if anything, or outside of class, if anything? So we're bringing it back to front and center. We've done our reflection. We've kind of had that time to debrief, a couple minutes, and then we just do back to a little bit more business before off you go. So it stays top of mind for students. If in particular, yeah, those like the more granular pieces in a larger project sequence. And what I love about that, let me just say, is over time, the hope is, the goal is, and what you'll find is if we've modeled it and done it with students and they've practiced it because it's part of the routine, Then eventually they're designing their own 3 week plan. They're looking at, okay, what is it? What is my goal? And maybe it doesn't have to be that grandiose, 3 weeks, right? What's my
Right.
goal? How am I going to accomplish that? We'll talk about goal setting in our third meeting, but those little mini goals, those little daily goals or weekly goals, what's that look like for me? And man, what talk about studentness, that feeling of like, I know what to do, I know how to get there.
Right.
And I might have to come back to that just like we all do every day to get those updates, but hope that helps.
It helped me. It was Sarah that made the comment about meeting the requirement for students with accommodations, but she also just put up middle school boot camp with her fourth through sixth grade students in spring semester. And she sent the binders with her students to their middle schools to help them with their transitions. And the best school years that this worked was when her middle school teachers adopted the same routines for their classes the next school year. I love that point, Sarah, because it's also what I want you to talk about, Mitch, is that you can use and DIY a routine out of this book. You don't need your school to buy organized binder. You've created these routines in this book for us to follow. You ask enough reflecting questions in each of the chapters to support
Hmm.
us in our progress to do it.
Yeah.
But ideally, your whole school would be doing it together,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. You hit the nail on the head. Even if you've read a little bit of the book, you've probably figured out that I believe in collective efficacy. And if we're going to get collective, um, so here's what the research says: that we can't expect changes in outcomes unless initiatives are implemented by the majority of teachers. What I always The next sentence that I add to that is I get it, right? And look at John Hattie's work, effect size at visible learning. When we get collective about things, it has what's called it's the effect size, the largest effect size most of the times, which means everybody has the most significant impact. Right. So if we're going to get collective, the majority of teachers implementing the initiative, well, it needs to be implementable by the majority of teachers. And too often our professional learning experiences aren't collective. And that's not to say it's not an important thing for us to learn and grow but it may not be something that we can implement by the majority of teachers just by the nature of it. But when we talk about executive functions, in particular, this approach is a tier one. It's grade level and subject area agnostic. So this teacher, Sarah, is talking about bridging that middle school transition, right? It's not a physical bridge. It's a it, but in some ways it is. I land in something that's familiar because so much of it's not familiar, but I know how to do this. I know this routine. I know how to organize myself. Sure, I'm still learning that and I'm being held accountable for doing it. But yes, uh, one kudos and to both her and then the people at the middle school that transition to embrace
Yeah.
that and be open to it. It's really fun to when I have the opportunity to do a district level training on all of this because everybody's in the room. And though it looks different in second grade and to fifth grade to eighth grade to 12th grade, but we're really getting tight about those transitions, which we know. I mean, the data is very clear. They're problematic for many of our learners. Um, and so, yeah, bridging that gap is huge and getting collective huge. And I wrote the book for any teacher that's at a school that's not using organized binder. Like I said, you can take these and run with it. And when you can get collective, it's also just fun. Brings about a shared language. We can talk about how it's going in your class. And meanwhile, we have this job to do, which is teach sixth grade math or eighth grade ELA or.
And they start their next year knowing the expectation. What's the expectation? I get my
Yep.
folder, I get my binder, I
Yeah.
sit down. I
And
especially to go for it.
real quick, I mentioned it again, probably moving too quickly, but at the end of the school year, if we're consistent with this routine, students literally have a year long portfolio as a
Mhm.
byproduct of routine, not grades. Right? That's important because it still feels really good to have that portfolio. What the one school we work with calls it the crown jewel. By the way, if anybody does student, teacher, student led parent teacher conferences, this portfolio is ideal.
Yeah,
Um,
it's done for you
but
though.
think about that. I get you just said like whatever. We had sixth grade. I get to seventh grade. I know the expectation. I know the routine. But I mentioned this as well. What would it mean if a school got collective and everybody showed up to pick any subject? We'll say ELA, their seventh grade ELA or English class with their sixth grade portfolio. That's that's interesting. And then into eighth grade, and think about what that does for PLC or subject area collaboration and dialogue about how we're helping make those transitions year after year, the consistency and the sequencing of both curriculum and this work with executive functions. So I interrupted you. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to talk about absence management. So when you have a student who's absent, so often it makes it hard for them to come back because they're embarrassed about what they missed. And I hate anytime there's shame brought to a kid. I worked in K-8.
Mm-hmm.
K-8 can't drive themselves to school. It's not their fault. If
Not their
they've been
fault. No.
absent,
Right.
and it starts to feel really shameful to them. And I always wanted to protect kids from feeling that shame. So having a very clear-cut system where they knew where to go, find their missing assignments, get back on track, and that agenda was really something that could support that. And you talked about it
Mm-hmm.
when you spoke of the agenda and how it
Yeah.
creates an inclusive environment. It's not about accommodating a need, it's about including everybody, no matter what your situation was.
Yeah. I mean, we get sick. Things
Hmm.
happen. And so, comes back to the class sample. So there's always a model and I can reference it. Maybe not any time because maybe we're engaged in something, but if I was absent, I always know I can just go and get my binder updated because of the class sample that's there, which includes the agenda. Here's what we did. It includes the table of contents. This is the assignments we covered or whatnot,
Hmm.
right? And that's back to clarity. Like there's absolutely no ambiguity, and so then we can have a much easier conversation about okay, how we get you caught up. Because I don't know how many times I've had a kid be like, "Well, I didn't do that." Well, why? Well, I wasn't here. I'm like, well, that's okay. I'm not. There's no shame there, but it's part of the sequence. Like that clarity piece, seeing it. Like we got to get you caught up. What's that going to look like?
Right.
Um, and that this is also true of new students. What about the student who adds a month into the school year or 2 months into the school year? They just shows up, right? They're in your class now. Think about this process where we're all using the same portfolio. We're doing the same routine. It looks the same for us, right? What I would do is just say, hey, welcome. Here's your binder. And everyone around you is going to explain how we do this. And I'm telling you, like in a day or two, you're going to be rocking. Anything before you got here that's really critical, which is usually that academic toolkit stuff, I'm going to get you, right? Don't worry about that. But most of this, you're starting fresh from here. But here's the routine that we do. And you would see them talking to them. He's like, you're going to show this prompt. You're going to write the prompt down.
Oh, I
We'll
love
help you
that.
with it this time because you don't know it yet. And talk about inclusion and just
Yeah.
feeling like, oh, I'm part of this already. And it's like the first day. That's
Yeah.
a scary thing, for kids to just show up and they haven't been there. And so the other piece of that was in terms of feeling more inclusive was walkthroughs with a special ed director, and she was, of course, the development of executive functions, but she was saying, you know what we love most? Two things. One, when we walk into a classroom, you can make assumptions about who's in the room, but you may or may not be wrong because everybody's engaged in this collective routine with their portfolio. In other words, the and organized binders are green and white. You might have figured out my favorite color is green, but um, I don't want the student with the IEP being the only one walking around with the green and white portfolio. That doesn't feel
Oh.
very inclusive to me. But if everybody's doing it and it's helping all of us, right? Kind of a win-win there. And the other piece was she said, and when we're in the classroom supporting a kiddo, working with this student, if we can't figure out the routine or the expectation, how are the students and how is this student? And there's just clarity around that. We know this step, we know where things go. And so it feels really inclusive, whether I'm absent, whether I'm adding late or not.
I love that you brought that up. Sometimes I would go into a classroom, there were one or two, and I couldn't figure out where we were, and I was
Mm-hmm.
trying to help. I was trying to
Yeah.
help get us caught up on homework, and I didn't know. I didn't know what the
Yeah.
project was.
Yeah.
So that was always a challenge. It would also, we had talked about it last week, but it would also help to simplify some rather complicated curriculums that teachers have to use. I don't know if anybody's districts maybe adopt these really robust, overly robust curriculums that you're trying. There's no chance with all the supplementary materials that you're going to get through all of it. And so to simplify down to what you really feel as a teacher is
Mm-hmm.
important can be supported through this as well.
Right. Right. To take the resources, and again, I hope it's really well intentioned. We bought this curriculum,
Yeah.
but then giving teachers, when they feel comfortable with it, the opportunity to curate the learning with that table of contents and toolkit. Like, what am I pulling from this? But we all, embellish and add to that with other resources that are available or even things we've created that we think really will amplify the learning and capturing that sequencing so students see it, right? Of course, they're practicing getting and staying organized, but yeah, you're taking something that's really complex and breaking it down into chunks that feel more manageable um, for students, for sure.
I don't know if you're seeing the chat, but Miranda and Sarah
I'm not.
are crushing it because
Okay.
Miranda brings up that it's defensible data too, that the student knows the routine the teacher has modeled and retaught how to obtain the missing assignments. It's true because how many middle schoolers in this land are going to argue, I didn't know, you know.
No.
And Sarah brought up the multiplication charts, graphic organizers, and other visual supports could be included in the academic toolbox. And Sarah, everyone who
Oh, for
needs
sure.
those supports, it would be gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do, again, as a science teacher, of course, I'm going to introduce, the scientific method at some point, beginning of the year. Let's say it's the first week. And in that, we talk about what is a hypothesis and how do you write a hypothesis and test a hypothesis, the stuff of science. That's what we're going to be doing in here. But I could be, here we are in May, right? And, let's say the school year started in August. And we could be in my class and setting up a lab, and I got kids in teams, and they're going to write their hypothesis, and we're going to get going on this. And I would tell them, I'd say, hey, okay, everybody, um, this is what we're going to be doing, and you're going to write your hypothesis. But first, everybody, turn to F, which the academic toolkit and organized binders, the tab F. Um, but turn to your academic toolkit, and it was always F1 for me because we did the scientific method right at the beginning. Turn to your notes or Cornell notes on F1 and find where we went over a hypothesis and review that real quick individually, and then just chat about it with your group before you even write this hypothesis. It's going to be an if then because statement. Like here, there's some structure to this. And students would open their binders and reference their notes that they took, 6, 7 months earlier. And I would always pause to the point where they would be like, oh, we know, Mr. Weathers, but I'd be like, do you see what you just did? You're looking at notes you took 6 months ago. And it didn't even take it. You just turned to it and reviewed it, and you're off and running, and you're actually going to be more successful with the content, the stuff we're doing here and learning. Because it's in that toolkit. And so I forget who made that comment, but it's those resources, the references, and then the things we add to throughout the school year that we want that
Right.
quick reference. And I've been in classrooms and even chatted with students where they're like, I can't find stuff from last week in most of my classes. That
Yeah.
doesn't feel good,
No.
right? I tell the story in the I think it's the table of contents chapter. I can't remember, but a student, maybe it's the binder check one. It's probably we haven't gotten there yet, but so I'm gonna spoil it. Um, but she had this massive 3-inch binder, that she carried around for all of her classes and refused to, and I think I changed her identity and stuff in the book, but a student, let's just say, and would come in every day and plop this 3-inch binder down, open it up, and there was like an inch and a half stack of papers the student would take out, set on the desk next to it, and then start rifling through the things that were in the big rings, trying to find the beginning routine for us. And finally, I had had enough of it. I was like, okay, hold on. And I, again, lab partner. So I had like pods of 4 students in this particular class. Went into my back storeroom, got 3 binders, came out, and I said, okay, everybody, this is a group project where all I want you to do is grab a pile and take stuff out of that big binder and just don't lose it. We're just going to do English, science, math. I forget the subjects. I was science. And that took like a minute or two. And I said, okay, put the other subjects, just put them in these other 1-inch binders. You don't have to do anything with it. We'll deal with that later. For my class, let's put this binder back together. And I'm not kidding. I just walked away. And I kind of from afar, I was watching, and you could hear them all talking, and they're opening their binders, saying, "No, see, this is part of this table of content." And within I mean, it was even shocked me how quickly she got this binder back together because she was there and doing the routine. She just didn't. She was holding out, like I'm not doing right. I walk over and I was like, "Way to go! That looks good." That's all I was going to say. And she looks up, or they look up, and uh, she pats on her chest, motions to herself, and she's like, "Mr. Weathers, I actually feel better. Like I can feel it." And I was like, "I know. Like when you learn to get and stay organized, when you do this, and you're going to be more successful. Like it feels good. And when I am in an opposite scenario, it just doesn't feel good, and that matters." So,
I'm going to extend on that because you stole my question 6.
oh,
That was question 6. I said, the stories are my favorite part of this book. And in
oh,
chapter
thank you.
6, we meet, you called him David. That's who you changed the identity to.
Oh, I did.
Who had a
Yeah,
really messy binder. But I was curious if he kept it going. So did he keep it going?
yeah, you did.
Yes.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to see because now it's like we're put together and we can move on. That's part of what we'll talk about next time with the binder check. Things
Hmm.
happen, just like the absence. I think
Yeah.
I stuff stuff in my book bag. I want to get out of here. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, every 4 weeks or whatever that teacher's on the call that you see appropriate. Um, you got to pump the brakes. Your binder needs to look like my binder, and when I do, restart. And when you do that, so like we can start there, and eventually some are starting to get disorganized even more. Some are tracking more, and pretty soon the routine's breaking down. I can promise you, like management issues start to arise, grades are
Yeah.
dropping. So I just pump the brakes. It's not negotiable. We are going to make your binder look like this binder. I don't care how many rechecks I have to do. And when we do, fist bump, 25 points in my class, and then off we go. So,
I love that. My dear Mitzi from Red Bluff, she asked how this routine looks the same or different for PE or other classes that are not typically in the classroom. So if a whole school adopted, what does
mm-hmm.
it look like for those other subjects that may not
Yeah,
be
that's a good
in?
question. Of course, any subject, any, discipline can have routines, how we begin, how we end. It really, it's site specific and figuring out what that looks like. I'll be honest, in PE, but I'll also tell you, I know PE teachers that have the binder and they want it because what they're really saying, I've heard this time and time again, like, this is a real class too. Like I'm teaching you really important
Yeah.
things. And even though it's PE and you might just think it's fun or you might just blow it off, but no, 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 this is actually important. And so we have a content and curriculum as well. Now, is it less writing? Sure, at times. Is there some? Yeah. Are there materials we hand out? Can we put those on a table of contents? Are there adjustments that need to be made because we're sitting on the blacktop outside? Perhaps, right? All those things not insurmountable, but it's like, hey, this is what we do collectively. Now, there may be a couple things I leave out of the routine, but I can still certainly participate in it.
Melinda says that No, I copied the wrong one. Mickey, she asked if you use a positive, she uses a positive reinforcement system in her middle school. Do you think it would be appropriate to reward students for filling in their B pages, agenda? Would it, so you talk about participation points. Would that be helpful to get the routine going? So maybe giving more positive reinforcement in the beginning and then taper off, or what are your thoughts on that?
I say positive why would you taper off of positive reinforcement ever? But 1000%. Who asked this? Mitzi? No,
Mickey.
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 1000%. Here's the thing. This is content agnostic. It's not the things we're learning. And we're tasked with teaching those. And so we have to be intentional in our grade book. But much of this routine, this work, more or less could be generally seen as a formative approach, formative feedback, formative assessment. So that beginning routine, that where we kick the lesson off and how we conclude, beginning and concluding routine. One of the reasons I designed it and put it all on one document that could be handed to me, it allows me to read and comment back, right? But I can give that a grade, right?
Yeah.
When at every 4 weeks we do the binder check. And so I'm checking that your binder looks like mine. And now let's keep in mind, we haven't done all the goal setting and stuff yet, but we begin together as a class community. It doesn't matter if you get it right or wrong. We conclude together as a class community. We update our agenda and our table of contents and on occasion the toolkit as a class community while you're seeing it modeled for you. Now, if you can't keep, if you just can't do that, again, that's not shame. That's curiosity. That's, hey, what's going on here? I used to tell students, like, after 2 weeks, if you can't get and stay organized, that's okay. We just need to have a conversation because something's going on. We need to figure that out because you
Right.
should be able to, in my opinion. Like, you should be able to engage in this routine. So the two places to the 1000% I'm saying is the daily participation, which that kickoff and concluding routine. And I would tell students, I'm going to give you 5 points a week for doing this. That was just in my class, and it worked for the scale of my grade book, right? Kind of like 1 point a day. But I'd also tell them, I rely on this single document as much as I rely on any classwork or homework that you do for me, right? This is your voice, your words. I need to hear from you. How did it land today? If it didn't, I need to hear that. I need to make adjustments, right? So, and then every 4 weeks, I would give students, it was 25 points, so kind of like 5, 6 points a week ish, for having their binder look like mine. And we'll go over this. The binder check schedule was prearranged because I never had enough time to do it. I would design a lesson that allowed me to come around check. We did a pre-check before then. And it's not a rubric. I'm not saying, oh, you're pretty organized. You're going to get 17 out of 25. You're almost there. You're like, what does it do for us to go through all of this to then say, well, you're kind of organized? No, it needs to look exactly like this. So it's not punitive. It's just, oh, this needs to be updated. This assignment's missing. You didn't update your agenda here. Take a moment and do it. Look at the class sample. Like, what do you need to do to get yourself back together? And once you're there, and we'll spend more time on this next time, then there's that point. So you're incentivizing in a way that's not, it's not tipping the content, either the content grade. So what I'm saying is,
Right.
students binder check is a 0 right now, or they're in process, right? Because that's what I always told my students. It's not a rubric. You're either organized or you're not. It's binary. It's black and white. So if you're not organized, it's 0 in the grade book until you get it organized. That's, again, not shame or punitive. It's just, this matters. It's usually pretty quick. Um, but I can't have a student drop to an F because they missed one of those weekly lifelines. And that's where I'm saying a participation, or
Yeah.
however you want to frame it, because that, by definition, a formative assessment does not have point value. To what I think this teacher, Mickey's leaning towards, is I think I can get a little more leverage out of this if I incentivize them, right? And that can't just be like candy and donuts. Like, hey, if you do this, that kind of falls apart. Would tell all my students there's this really effective education strategy, learning strategy that no one ever tells you about. And I'd be like, what's that? I'm like, it's I forget what I'd call it, like the law of easy points or something. I'd make something up. And I'm like, here's the deal. Every class, every grade you take and have taken, but let's say from ninth grade forward, every class you find yourself in, there's going to be some really easy points to get for your grade, and there's going to be some that are really hard to earn. And in this class, there's going to be some that are hard to earn. I'm going to tell you, and I would name some of those things. And I said, that's not this stuff. This is about is all I'm asking you to do is show up and engage with the community, the learning community. And if you do that, I'm going to give you 5 points a week. That's 90 points in a semester. 90 easy points.
Right.
You know, so it's like just there's ways to talk about it, and that's actually true, right? I don't care what the class is. Think about that. My 16-year-old daughter has really got that figured out where she's like, ooh, this is coming up. She's really intentional about staying on top of everything so that she gives herself a little cushion for when it gets hard. So those were some of my ideas.
And that skill too is your studentness. Being able
Oh,
to
yeah.
examine what's important, what can I get easy, prioritizing. Those are all those abilities to be a student that are going to come
And
from learning how to get organized and reading the room. There's a
yeah,
lot of
reading the,
social skill
yeah,
development in this
right.
too.
Knowing
Reading
how
the
to
room
do
and figuring
school.
it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's what we do. I mean, let's be honest, that's work, that's everything.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not trying to say like take the easy road. It's just a way to, I found it as a way to motivate students
Sure.
to engage. So that
Sure.
incentivizing is helpful.
I can't tell you how many kids with that I served as a special ed teacher who would give up and not go for it because they felt it was too hard. So you're giving them
Mm,
an entry point to a place that they're, yes, I can get that. I can get that. And you're just building on little successes all the time. And
yeah.
that's what I like about it. It's not about the easy points, it's about giving an entry point to somebody who is in that place that they have had that overload for so many years. And they're like,
Hmm.
I'm not doing too hard.
Yeah, and you have a narrative that forms that starts to
Yeah.
become a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it's our job to rewrite that narrative so students start to see themselves differently. Carol Dweck says it that the view we take of ourselves not only impacts, I'm paraphrasing here, um, academics, but the life we live, like how I perceive myself within this context, within, in this case, this academic setting, has a profound effect on how successful I can be. So if
Hmm.
I think I can't do it, you're probably right. And maybe
Yeah.
you're right in thinking that because of your lived experience, but so much of this clarity, modeling, routine, and executive function start to switch that narrative. And again, just engaging in it, even if while I'm struggling, gives me opportunities for success. But when it does get hard, I've got that granularity in the tool in the table of contents and the toolkit, and I've done this with the kid that's like, I can't do this. I don't know this. And I'll be like, look at assignment number 5. Oh, oh, that's right. We have the like it little victories start to snowball for sure.
Yeah. And Melinda brought it up. She has a student who earned D's and C's until finally getting him to try a binder, and now he's earning A's with the same amount of effort. What, Melinda? So, and then she asked how long you would say the entire start routine takes. So they're giving students 1 minute to open their binder, 2 minutes to do the weekly lifeline, then 1 to 2 minutes for the agenda.
Yeah, so it's faster and faster once the routine is in place.
Oh, brilliant.
I can say that the duration is the variable is the kickoff. And the reason for that is a couple things. One, the prompt you ask, the response is predicated on the prompt, right? So it might be more
Right.
like might be taking longer than you expected, and it might be taking longer than you expected for a few reasons. It might have been the prompt. It might have been you wove in a pair share in there, you did something and you're like, "Oh man, this is taking longer than I thought." Or more commonly, there are more questions. There's more conversation. There's more review that needs to happen. And you're like, this is taking longer than I planned for. I don't have time for this in my lesson. I always had to step back because that happened to me, all the time. this is time well spent. Why are we moving on to what's next if this is what is going on? And in a more
Right.
traditional setting, right, the formative assessment often is like homework, which in the book, it's both unreliable and inequitable in a lot of ways. But I'm basically, you've did this thing yesterday. Maybe you did a little homework. I collect that homework. We go on to what we're doing today. At the end of that day, we're going on. I'm looking at the stuff from the previous day. And so you kind of have this weird catch up where this is saying, no, 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 right? Let's just try to catch those things now and make those adjustments. So if you want a more efficient starting routine, ask a more efficient prompt if needed. The agenda is pretty baked in. You can see, depending on what you're having students write, how long that will take. I can't put a specific number on there, but no more than. So I'll just speak from my class. Students would walk in, and once it was routine, we started within 3 seconds because the expectation was your binder's open, you're at your seat, you might be chatting to your neighbor, sharpening your pencil. I mentioned it earlier. I'm engaging you every day in the work of getting ready to learn. And the reason it's called a kickoff is I played competitive soccer growing up. All my students at the time played or loved soccer. And I said, look, if I had this prompt up for you when you showed up, that would be like showing up to the soccer match and just running out on the field and starting to play because you're there. No gear on, you just start scoring goals. Like that just makes no sense, right? And they're like, no. Like, let's talk about what happens, right? You get to the field, you get your gear on, you're warming up, the other team's doing the same. You figure what position you're going to be playing, the officials come. There's this whole song and dance that happens that you don't even think about anymore because it's routine, repetition. You just do it. But what you do know is you have to be ready to go when that whistle blows for the sake of your team, right? It's the kickoff. And the same is true for learning. I'm not just going to have you run in here and start doing something. There's work in getting ready to learn, just like there's work in getting ready to play. And I actually took it as far in my classes, especially those that were really struggling. I'm like, this isn't a class anymore. What if we pretended we're a team? And if you were a soccer team and the goalie decides to not be ready, is that a good thing when the game starts? I don't think so.
No.
So what if we all kind of were relying on each other because we're a team? And here's the nice thing is it's this simple. I want you in your seat, binder open to this page, and you'll see me when we're about to get ready. I'm going to walk to the front of the classroom. More than willing to meet with people on Zoom and show you videos of this. And then we start, and it's like 3 seconds. So it's not a minute to get your binder, to get it open. That's all happening ideally ahead of time. Now, of course, maybe there's a different circumstance I don't understand. Then we jump into the kickoff, agenda, table of contents, and teacher lesson.
So it was Brittany. I made a mistake. It was Brittany that asked that question. And then she said, so the kickoff is more dynamic than maybe I was giving it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
the
I
kickoff was
would, and
important.
I'll tell you this, once it's routine and in place, it's really interesting how students gravitate towards this particular routine. Um, but even like I remember, I like had this thing in place and my school had adopted it, and this is like what we did. And I would have lessons where I'm like, I don't think I have time. And I made the mistake once or twice, and then I never did it again, where I was the teacher that stood at the door and high fived and greeted kids as they were coming in. And on this day, I was like, hey, there's no kickoff. There's no kickoff. There's no kickoff. Just get to your seat, get your binder out. We're going to pick up right where we left off yesterday. It's like some long lab or something we were doing.
Yeah.
And I turn around and it's like chaos in my classroom, not in a bad way. They're just
Yeah.
like day off. And kids are coming in and they're like, hey, there's no kickoff. Like, and I just lost them. And it ended up taking me, the bell rang and I'm like, sit, like, what is happening right now? I'd strayed from the routine. And I ended up using more time to get this. So what I committed to after that is I have that weekly lifeline up and I would have either the briefest of prompts, because sometimes I did like whatever we were doing, I needed every second or something. So I thought. And other times I'd have, okay, bell would ring. I'd wait for it to get quiet, quick check. Okay, everybody's on, right? I can see all that visual cueing, right? All those white B pages. I can tell if you're engaged or not. You're with us.
Right.
And then I start and it says skip or something. And they'd be like, oh, and then we'd move right to the agenda. And I had them like within, it only took
I
like
know.
5 seconds. So there's ways
That's
to have fun with it.
Yeah, that's a good psych out. I did love, and I don't remember when, but it was at the beginning of the book. You talked about that there was so much gray area, wasted time.
Mhm.
And I especially loved the talk, if you could revisit quickly. I don't remember where it was in the book. It was one of the earlier chapters, but he had talked about how it was unfair for some kids who walked in late
Mm.
and other to catch up to where everybody was. And so the importance of starting that on time too,
Mm-hmm.
so that everybody was at the exact same time beginning the prompt. I think you talked about not having it posted on the board ahead of time.
Right. Because kids, students, sorry, I tend to call students kids. Um, but if you're teaching college, but they're not kids. But the routine, I mean, they just, I can remember, like they just, there's a certain empowerment in knowing what to do and how to do it. Like I know how to do this. I'd have students
Right.
like, this is my favorite class because I know exactly what, and because of that, they would show up kind of early and get stuff done. And this was, I at one point I had to stop writing the agenda. I used to just have that on the whiteboard, and the kickoff and stuff was digital. Um, just kind of my process. And I would find students behind the screen. This was like a roll down screen projector, not like a smart board, with their binder
Right.
before class even started. Like you could see them, like they could barely get in there. It's right up against the whiteboard because I hid it behind the white and be like, get out of there. Um, and they just yeah, I think it was like, hey, I know what to do, I'm going to get ahead or whatnot. And so yeah, waiting and letting it be. What I noticed was students were starting to feel like they're behind and they weren't even late to class. And I was
Hmm.
like, that doesn't feel good. What, I mean, sorry to be kind of gross, everybody, but what if I had to pee? What if I had to go to the bathroom in a secondary setting? That's kind of part of the transitions too. Like if I got to go to the bathroom, I had to stop by my locker, or maybe I was talking to a teacher after class and now I'm here and like half the people are done. Like it just had a weird feel to it. But more importantly, what I outline in that is around classroom management is then I start and I've created a scenario where let's just say half of the students are done with the prompt. What are they going to do? Even the most well-intentioned young person at a minimum is going to be a distraction because
Right.
why do I have to write? And I had students that fought against the routine. They didn't want, they would do it. But if Sarah's done and I'm not, and Sarah's smart, she's a good student, she's here, all that is playing into this, right?
Right.
And I'm sitting there next to the student, just do your prompt so we can go over like, and then it turns into this battle. It starts
Right.
to break down, or I should say, it can break down in ways. And so, one simple solution, what I showed everybody, have something that is the visual cue, but I'm not engaging you in learning. I'm engaging you in the work of getting ready to learn. That's what that template is. That's all it is. I want it to look exactly like yours, right? So there's no ambiguity. And then I prompt you in the engaging together, and it feels a little bit better. And for the students, some of the videos we show in from classrooms using this routine in organized binder trainings have, kids show up tardy. That happens too. But it's very inclusive. Like I know what to do. I got my binder, a seat, and right in that prompt. Like you can see them just stepping in. And it's another thing to think about when we're talking about our beginning routine. I've had situations I write about a little bit in the book where it's if you're not there on time, you're kind of excluded, like you're kept from engaging. And it's like, you don't know what's happened there. I think that's where I tell the story. I had a student that showed up late every day, not much, but late every day to the beginning of school.
Right.
And I was, for whatever reason, super relationship forward teacher and loved on kids. And I missed the classroom every day still. Like, but tardies drove me crazy. I don't know why, because I knew, like cognitively, like I don't. It's out of my sphere of influence. I don't know why you're late, but if you're late every day, what's going on? And finally, I pulled the kid aside and talked to him privately. I'm like, hey, what's going on, man? Like, what this is, you're late every day. Is like, oh, Mr. Weathers, I'm so sorry. I have to take 3 city buses to get to school, right? Not school buses, 3 different city buses. And I'm like, tell me about that. Like, he's like, well, his family, not himself, but was affiliated with a certain gang. And the neighborhood you walk through from his neighborhood, that's a direct walk to the school, is a rivalry gang. And he's like, I can't walk through that neighborhood. So I have to, I have this whole thing I do, this journey every day to get to school. And all of a sudden, talk about a shift for me. Instead of, I mean, I should be celebrating this kid showing up 5 minutes late, and having something or however, like minute, two, whatever. But you can jump right in. And let's say you needed to go back and get that kickoff because we're done with it. Guess what? There's a class sample binder. Guess what? Your neighbors have that. Like, I want you to get here and engage. And there's an expectation. I'm going to hold you accountable because can't talk accountability till we have that kind of clarity. And we can't get clarity till we take that ambiguity and we paint the gray areas black and white. And then we do. Hey, you're late. Sorry about that. Make sure you get the kickoff. Binder checks coming, that kind of thing.
We have a special request and we'd like special treatment because we're all here until 5:30. If there's a video that could support this that maybe we could show next time, would that ever be a possibility
I
of
can,
just the kickoff routine?
yeah, absolutely. If you would
I
have
know it.
asked me 3 minutes earlier, I would show. I
I
could
know,
show.
but we're
I
running
want
out
to
of
respect
time.
people's time.
I
Will you
know.
remind me? We will start with
Yeah,
that. I'll show you. I'll actually
yeah.
show you two.
But it was Brittany and Denise that wanted that. And I think that would be helpful because reading it in the book is one thing and talking about
Yeah,
it, but actually seeing it in practice, I think is going to make it a
I
little
see
bit different.
Janelle. Um, yeah, and that's funny you say that. That every organized binder training now, there's a video. Like whoever the trainer is uses the program. They show right. And I didn't used to do that. And one time I was literally out of school live talking, um, and training teachers, and there was just questions coming out. Well, what about that? And I was like, do you guys just want to see it? And they were like, really? I'm like, yeah, here. And I just never had thought of why wouldn't I incorporate the video? Play the video, minute or two, most. And I hear this from the back of the room. Oh, that's what you mean. And that's the clarity piece we want for kids in the classroom too. I want to know exactly what you mean. So
Right.
thanks everybody. Janelle is here and hovering at the top of my screen anyway.
Now I'm
Now
associated
she
with
is.
ending it.
All
No.
right, right on time.
My
Can I
goodness.
say something real quick, Janelle, and then I'll be quiet
Yes,
the rest of the time? Everybody
yes.
that's here, first of all, thank you for being here. Any questions that come up from this or between now and next time, my email is in the book, and I will get back to you with lightning speed. Love to hear from you.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm seeing the chat. People are excited about being able to see these videos. So appreciate you accommodating us. And before I even jump into the closing, I want to recognize Jasmine, our ASL interpreter. We were supposed to have a backup for her today, and there was an emergency. So she has been holding strong with us this entire session. Thank you so much, Jasmine. We really appreciate you. You've been incredible. Mitch and Sarah, you two make it look easy breezy in these conversations. It's a pleasure to spend the evening with you. And for the rest of the folks online, we sincerely thank you for your time, your engagement, thoughtful reflection that you brought into this space. Today's conversation truly highlighted something really important, and that supporting executive functioning is not about adding one more initiative or program. It's about intentionally designing learning environments that make thinking visible, routines predictable, and success more accessible for students. So, with that, we'd like to invite you to complete a brief survey today. Before you log off, please give us your feedback, and because it does continue to shape this series, it helps us plan for a meaningful learning experience for all of you. We hope to see you in session 3 on June 11th, where we will build on today's work by exploring how executive functioning connects to student agency, self-monitoring, and long-term independence across learning environments. Lastly, thank you again for choosing to spend your afternoon, evening with us. We know May is a busy time and just
Mhm.
so delighted that you carved out space to spend time with us. So appreciate all of you so much and see you soon.